The vehicle rocked softly under my weight, the chill of the leather seat pressing against my skin. Chris's breath was warm and uneven, his hands clasping my waist as he drew me nearer. The windows misted over, the outside world fading into obscurity, yet in that instant, I couldn't dispel the sensation that we were not entirely solitary. Perhaps an observer lurked in the shadows, or maybe they had been there all along, and that notion only fueled the longing further. Before we proceed, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. Your support significantly contributes to the channel's growth, and if you've already taken that step, I sincerely thank you for being a part of this journey. Now, let's explore further. The car door banged shut, and the frigid night air bit at my warm skin. I inhaled rapidly, my hands trembling as I embraced myself tightly. I had expressed my refusal, resolutely and unmistakably, yet he chose to ignore it. Just give it a try, darling, you might enjoy it. The recollection sent a shiver through me, his hold growing firmer, his breath warm against my skin, intruding into spaces I wished to keep untouched. The irritation in his tone when I distanced myself, as though I were the one causing all the chaos, as if I had committed some grave mistake. I inhaled sharply, clearing my face before retrieving my phone. I had no intention of returning to that house tonight. Request for a ride has been made. The driver will be here in 2 minutes. All right. I required some distance. I craved the fresh breath of the open sky. I had to take a moment to gather my thoughts before making a decision I might look back on with remorse. A pair of luminous headlights from a glossy black car sliced through the night as it glided to a stop next to me. My heart raced in my chest as I flung the door open and slipped inside. The door clicked shut, and for a brief moment, the car sat still before it smoothly rolled ahead. I breathed out, brisk and sudden. Anywhere but this place. The vehicle glided ahead, the glow of streetlights streaking by the glass. I inhaled deeply and slowly. With my arms crossed tightly over my chest, a simmering frustration continues to ignite within me. Rough night? The driver's deep, smooth voice inquired. I hardly glanced away. One might argue that. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror, and I felt a sharp intake of breath. Years had passed, yet that face remained familiar, now stronger and more defined. It was indeed Chris. He was always there in high school, silently observing me, yet he never took any action. I was aware of his feelings for me, yet my attention was drawn to another person. And now, there he was, taking me away from the chaos of my evening. Do you remember me? He inquired, his gaze locking with mine in the reflection. I reclined, my arms remaining crossed. Ah, that brings back memories. His hold on the steering wheel grew a bit firmer. Indeed, you never acknowledged my presence back then. A sly smile crept across my face. You never attempted? He laughed softly, with a hint of understanding. It wouldn't have made a difference. Your attention was drawn to another person. I chose not to respond. The stillness lingered, heavy with things left unsaid. For the first time tonight, my frustration extended beyond just my husband. It centered around my experience. Reflecting on the decisions I embraced, the desires I pursued, and the opportunities one refrained from seizing. My gaze returned to Chris. How his voice had grown richer. How his hands curved around the wheel. How he had stopped stealing glances altogether. He was observing me. I took a deep breath, adjusting in my chair, the smooth leather brushing against my legs. I whispered that I required some fresh air. Pull over? He inquired, raising an eyebrow. I nodded, and the turn signal clicked softly as we came to a halt in the shadowy lot. I surveyed my surroundings. The street lay silent and deserted, yet in the distance, a solitary car lingered beneath the wavering glow of a street lamp. Not solitary, not completely. I paused for a brief moment, sensing the gravity of the risk, then leaned in, my elbows perched on the center console, near enough to detect the subtle hint of his cologne. I never claimed I wasn't intrigued, I whispered. It's simply that you never made the effort. His jaw tightened, fingers gripping the wheel, and in an instant, the atmosphere around us transformed. For a brief moment, he remained silent, his hands tightly gripping the wheel, knuckles taut and flexing. At last, a smirk played on his lips. "So what, you believe I should have put in more effort?" he inquired. I drew a languid, aimless design on the leather seat. "Perhaps," I playfully suggested, the word escaping my mouth with a touch of provocation. He emitted a soft laugh, shaking his head slightly. "That's astonishing. You once behaved as if I were invisible." I leaned my head slightly, observing him closely. "That is not accurate." A glimmer of doubt crossed his features, and I pressed my lips together, irritation morphing into something more pointed, something intentional. "If my husband is willing to cross boundaries, why shouldn't I explore that too?" I moved with deliberate slowness, ensuring Chris caught my attention, my voice laced with a playful allure. "If you had made an effort back then, what actions would you have taken?" His hold on the wheel became firmer, and his voice lowered to a hushed tone. "Are you interested in hearing about my high school dreams?" A smile spread across my face. "What's stopping us?" "A diversion would be quite welcome." He breathed out, his tongue gliding over his teeth. His chest lifted slightly, burdened with a deeper weight. "I would have taken you to a secluded place," he said, his voice now a soft whisper. "Isolated from the crowd. I had you all to myself." I arched an eyebrow. "Is that all?" Somewhat subdued. His eyes shifted toward me, now filled with a deeper intensity. "That's precisely where I would begin." Heat coiled deep within me, ignited not only by his words but by the intent behind them, the vivid imagery he conjured in his mind. I reclined, crossing my legs with deliberate ease, observing as his gaze dipped briefly before darting back up. "What holds you back at this moment?" I inquired, my tone unwavering, serene. His jaw clenched, yet he remained silent. The atmosphere surrounding us grew dense, the path before us shrouded in darkness and void. I drew nearer, my breath gently brushing against his ear. "Stop the car," I whispered. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel. "Kindly request it." A smile spread across my face, lips curling gently. "Kindly?" The blinker emitted a rhythmic click as the car decelerated. The street lay in stillness, yet we were not solitary figures in the night. I kept it simple. Moved forward without a moment's doubt. I shifted, the confines of the car snug, yet it didn't bother me. I maneuvered over the center console, positioning myself on his lap, sensing the heat of his body through the fabric as my knees made contact with the seat. The windows loomed in shadow, their presence not completely obscured. A street lamp flickered in the distance, casting a soft, wavering glow over the dashboard. A short distance away, the low rumble of a car engine lingered in the air. A vehicle sat idle, perhaps anticipating a call, perhaps simply lingering in the moment. Chris halted beneath me, his breath suspended in a moment that teetered between a gasp and a groan. His hands lingered at my waist, hesitant, as if seeking an invitation. I moved closer, my lips lightly grazing the curve of his ear. "You desired this back then, didn't you?" I murmured. His fingers danced restlessly. "Indeed," he rasped, his voice gritty. I continued to do so. He was essential to me. I pressed my lips against his gently at first, exploring, enticing. His lips were warm and eager, parting against mine as he surrendered to his desires. His hands settled on my hips, holding them firmly, drawing me nearer until the heat of his longing enveloped me. The night outside was serene, yet it brimmed with presence. Each caress from Chris ignited a thrill within me. It wasn't solely due to him, but also because of our surroundings and the gamble we were undertaking. The vehicle seemed to shrink, the atmosphere thick with unvoiced tension lingering between us. Each shift of my body ignited a flurry of sensations within me, the intensity escalating with every fleeting second. Chris let out a low groan, his fingers clenching more tightly. "In the back seat," he murmured. I flashed a sly grin, playfully beckoning him as I slipped into the back, urging him to come along. He advanced without a moment's pause, navigating between my legs, his hands resting on my thighs, his body melding with mine. At that instant, I realized there was no way to reverse my course. I pulled at his shirt, sensing the strength underneath. His lips glided over my collarbone, and I could feel my heartbeat quickening beneath his caress. The vehicle swayed gently, a subtle reminder of our presence in the world around us. Chris's smile against my skin was a quiet recognition of the tension, his voice low as he murmured something that required no response. The windows misted over, the atmosphere growing dense with warmth, alive with the rhythm of our breaths and the heaviness of our emotions. It was audacious, it was perilous, and yet I had never experienced such a vivid sense of existence. Chris's grip on my thighs intensified, drawing me nearer, as he pressed me into the cool leather seat. His body radiated warmth against me, robust and unwavering. He kissed me again, more fiercely, with an insatiable desire, and I sensed every bit of control shatter as his hands moved over me, discovering, possessing. My fingers wove through the strands of his hair, drawing him nearer, as the heat between us flared even more intensely. Outside, the world faded away, the car enveloped us, drawing our bodies into a familiar rhythm that suggested this was not our first time, as if we were destined to be intertwined like this. The juxtaposition of his warmth against the cool leather beneath me sent a shiver racing down my spine. His hands descended, firmly holding my hips as he guided me to his desired position. My breath hitched as his lips brushed against the hollow of my throat, igniting a surge of longing within me. Suddenly, a car drove by, shattering the stillness of the moment. Chris paused momentarily, his breath warm and weighty against my skin. I smiled, encouraging him to keep going. His voice was deep and gravelly, and his grip tightened once more, this time with a sense of urgency. "I've yearned for this for ages," he whispered, his voice heavy with longing. A surge of excitement coursed through me, and I softly encouraged him to embrace every part of me. His hands became bolder, his touch increasingly assertive. I leaned into him, acutely aware of his presence enveloping me. The vehicle swayed gently as we intertwined, the warmth intensifying, overwhelming, relentless. The faint shimmer of a streetlight served as a reminder of our vulnerability, yet the exhilaration of the moment intensified my longing. Chris let out a low groan, his breath uneven as he leaned into me. The urgency in his movements was palpable, the intensity of the moment unmistakable. "You feel incredible," he whispered, and in that moment, everything fell apart. Ecstasy surged within me, and I leaned back, my fingers pressing into his flesh. In the quiet that followed, Chris drew near, his body quaking against mine as our breaths began to steady. We remained still for what felt like an eternity, our bodies intertwined, skin glistening, heartbeats quickening. Outside, a door slammed, echoing the reality that life continued beyond the boundaries of this car. I breathed out slowly, my fingertips gently touching the nape of his neck, sensing the quick rhythm of his heartbeat. The atmosphere was heavy with perspiration and contentment as Chris released a gravelly laugh, running a hand across his face. He locked eyes with me, a smile teasing the edges of his mouth. "Surprised you when you walked in, didn't it?" he whispered. I smiled subtly, reclining comfortably in my seat, still savoring the delightful sensation lingering between my thighs. "No," I confessed, regaining my composure, "yet I have no grievances." He let out a breath, a subtle shake of his head preceding his lean back, his fingers gently grazing my waist. The night outside lay in silence, yet we were anything but quiet. The vehicle was still, save for the rhythm of our irregular breaths, the intensity of the moment hanging in the air, a gentle reminder of all that had just transpired between us. I adjusted my dress, yet the sensation of Chris's touch, the way he had marked me, remained vivid. He drummed his fingers softly on the steering wheel, his eyes darting toward me. Obscure, yet laden with an ineffable weight. "Are you on your way home?" he inquired, his tone composed and unwavering, yet the tension lingered in the air around us. I peered through the window at the shadowy street beyond. Residence. Returning to my husband. Yet returning meant feigning that I wasn't seething, feigning that I hadn't just allowed another man to possess me in a manner my husband never could. No, I had no intention of returning. I glanced at Chris, a smile playing on my lips. Bring me to your space. Certain allurements are simply too enticing to ignore, and some dangers render the experience unforgettable. But tell me, would you have paused, or would you have allowed the excitement to consume you, just as I did? We invite you to express your opinions in the comments section. I'm eager to listen to all viewpoints. And if you appreciated this, please give that delightful like button a tap and subscribe. Don't forget to give a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more engaging content on my channel.